Great to be here. I actually want to open this talk with a little confession from my side. I actually wrote that for like 7 times and I almost didn't want to do it because every version of that talk sounded too perfect, too clean, too much like from someone who had figured it all out. I actually wrote 7 versions and they were all perfect, but none of them were honest. So let me start with some personal insights that might help you as well. For most of my life, I ran. I ran not from danger, but from something that is a little bit quieter and more difficult to grasp. I ran toward very good grades. I ran toward titles. I'm a PhD, for example. I'm a CPA. I'm a certified business coach. Everything worked. I ran toward the moment where someone I respected would come up to me and say, yes, you're enough. And the only question that I never asked myself throughout that time was actually, why am I actually doing this? And that's a very simple answer why I never asked myself the question, because it's pretty terrifying to ask yourself this question. Let me take you back to my childhood, to 2 very specific moments to give you a little bit of context. First was at the end of the 90s, and I'm a car freak, and my dad was a car freak too, and we often went out to wash his car. Back then he had a beautiful Mercedes AMG, and every car in our family was only hand washed, of course. And we went out together and it was nice, it was great, it was a sunny day, and I helped him washing the car. And suddenly I caught a windscreen wiper the wrong way, and with a super loud noise, it snapped off and it flew through the wash bay. When my dad figured that out, he didn't come up to me and say, hey, did you hurt yourself? Are you okay? Instead, he screamed at me. He shouted at me. He shouted at the car. He cursed, whatever it was. Yeah, takes his time again. He needs to pay for it. Whatsoever. Second situation, I was 16 years old and I was riding my motorcycle. And as a young petrol head, of course you want to try the knee down in the turns. And what follows is what you can imagine, you fall off the bike. And this happened to me when I was 16. It was nothing serious. I had a few bruises, a few cuts, and I felt a little bit shaken. And my dad arrived to the side where the little accident happened. And again, he didn't ask me, did you hurt yourself? The only thing that happened is, again, that he shouted at me, that he screamed. Why did I cause that damage? Now he has to pay for it again. This motorbike was expensive, and so on and so forth. Whenever these problems were dealt with 3 or 4 days later, nothing or no one talked about them anymore. Everything was dealt with. In my family, things got fixed. Damage got repaired. Super quickly, sometimes expensively, definitely never inefficiently. And my dad's role was to provide for us, and he did that remarkably well. The only issue was that feelings never played any part. They weren't even in the room. And whenever feelings are never in the room throughout your childhood, your nervous system draws a very simple conclusion. And that conclusion is, it doesn't matter how you feel. The only thing that matters is whether things are intact. And the corollary of that is, what I only figured out probably 2 decades later is, whenever something breaks, including you, the question is not, are you okay? The only question is, what did you do wrong? And when this actually happens to you, you don't have an inner voice anymore. You don't have an inner compass anymore, and you look in the outside world for approval. Yeah? Whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever you want to say, you always ask yourself the question, do the people actually approve this? Would they respect me when I express that? When you lose your inner voice and you only look outside yourself for approval. You create a person that is genuinely lost. And I remember myself sitting in school, listening to some teachers. I always say I was someone in school who was absent in a very present way. I always thought, why would I listen to these teachers? What do they know about my life? What do they actually know and want to teach me? So I was genuinely lost for probably 19 years of my life. Until the 1st of October 2009, the first day of my studies, when I made a very conscious decision. And the decision was that I was going to reinvent myself. I was going to become a new version of myself. I was going to be successful, I was going to be popular, I was going to write excellent grades, and I was going to make a career. And this worked remarkably well. Yeah. I landed a job at EY back then. I worked for Deloitte. I was one of the youngest senior managers in Germany at Deloitte. I did my PhD while full-time employment. I did my CPA exam. I did my business coach certification. I founded my own company with now almost 40 employees. On paper, everything looked perfect. I thought I would have finally discovered who I was. The only difference, and this is also a very, very subtle difference, is not that you discover your true self. The only self that you discover is a self that you need to maintain. And as we all know, maintenance is very exhausting, and you can never stop maintaining yourself, because if I would have stopped maintaining my new self, then potentially the little boy or the lost teenager would have shown up, which wouldn't have been enough. Achievement is a very powerful drug. Yeah. Achievement, every little achievement feels like a relief in the moment. And this little relief always feels great. Yeah. It feels like fulfillment, but a relief is definitely not fulfillment. And when you go on like this, eventually the system struggles. And I had this first moment in 2015 on vacation. And usually vacations were great. Yeah, you have like 4 to 6 weeks off in audit in summer. Great weather, great vacation, and you rest. But in 2015, for the first time, rest created anxiety. Rest created nervousness. I couldn't sit down anymore because the little teenager tried to show up. And for the following 4 years, I even worked harder. I pushed harder. I achieved whatever I wanted to achieve. And in 2019, in my peak year, where I got married, where we moved in a wonderful apartment in Munich, where I finished my PhD as the fastest one in my cohort, and I got promoted, and I landed a job at my dream company, it actually ended. And in the last week before Christmas, it was way behind midnight, and I was actually finishing a task on my desk. And when I finished this, which would have been a huge milestone before, I didn't feel anything. I just felt emptiness that frightened me. And yeah, a burnout is usually the end to a system where the maintenance doesn't work anymore and where you cannot keep up anymore. Ego, for a long time, I thought, is arrogance. The smartest person in the room, the loudest person in the room, the person that always defends his or her ideas. And then I started therapy. And what I found out actually is that ego has nothing to do with therapy. Ego is basically just a protection system that gets built in a room like the one that I described. And what's happening in practice is that companies spend millions of euros every year for awesome consultants that do awesome slides around culture, around codes of conduct, that rewrite the intranet for a company, that write vision and mission statements on a wall. The only problem is that the stuff I just described, the ego, is usually still a protection system that is usually wearing a very, very expensive suit. And usually these companies or these people climb up the ranks because they have the drive, they have the energy, they have the reason to overcome others and defend themselves. But as soon as they are on the very top and the peak of their career probably, they create an environment where people can't speak up anymore because these people are anxious or afraid that other people might have the better ideas. These people don't create an environment where people want to provide feedback to improve the respective company. They don't provide any environment. And then corporates are usually questioning, why are we struggling with our corporate culture? We need a new workshop. We need a new leadership engagement circle or whatsoever. We need a new code of conduct. We need a new vision and mission statement. Maybe we need a new rebranding to be cooler and younger or whatsoever. But I can tell you, if the person at the very top didn't do this inner work that I just described, the culture will still be a very toxic one, because the psychological issues of these leaders will just scale amongst hundreds and thousands of people in this organization. And this is the big issue that many corporates and many companies are facing. The psychological issues of the people at the very top. And then of course it's all the employees' fault that the culture is bad. Yeah. Typical corporate, as I usually experience it in practice. I want to be careful at this stage in my talk because now everyone is expecting a big revelation or a solution from my side. I can only say very honestly and openly, I'm still struggling. I'm still struggling with external approval that I need. The seek for external approval showed up this morning when I prepared for this talk. It's probably here right now. Do you approve this talk? Do you find this great? Yeah. This is actually the question. The only thing that changed for me is that I'm aware of this mechanism. Yeah. I'm aware in everyday situations as a leader in my own firm and in other roles that I have, when my ego shows up and wants to protect me or fight for survival in modern times. Yeah. And in the moment you're aware of this, you actually have an advantage, because in the moment you don't obey this anymore, you're free. You create freedom for yourself because you're not in your own cage and in your own prison that fights for survival. In very simple terms, I want to leave you with a question this afternoon. What are you actually running toward right now? And is this actually where you want to go? Or is this just far enough away from what you not want to feel? Take that question with you, try to answer it, and then eventually you might come to the point where you can say, I don't need your approval in order to know who I am. Thank you very much.